Night arrived in California the way it always did, without ceremony, without mercy. The city dimmed its edges, but never truly slept. Neon signs hummed like tired insects, traffic softened into distant rivers of sound, and somewhere between concrete walls and forgotten alleys, a single melody rose against the noise. He played every night, not because crowds gathered, not because success waited around the corner. He played because stopping felt like disappearing. The guitar was older than his ambitions. Scratched wood, dulled varnish, strings replaced one by one whenever he could afford them. It had survived rain, dust, and hands that sometimes trembled from hunger or exhaustion. When he held it, the city seemed to lean in slightly, as if curious whether this would be the night he finally gave up. Coins rested on the pavement near his worn boots, scattered and shy. They reflected the streetlights in small, embarrassed flashes. Enough for cheap food. Never enough for rent stability. Always enough to remind him that hope, like music, could be stretched thin without breaking. He had learned early that talent alone did not open doors. It merely showed where the doors should be. The corner he chose was deliberate. Not the loudest, not the busiest. A place where footsteps slowed naturally, where people walking alone sometimes allowed themselves to feel something unexpected. He understood rhythm not only in music, but in human movement. He knew when to soften a note, when to let silence breathe, when to let the melody ache instead of impress. The songs were not polished, they were honest. Each chord carried fragments of a life lived just below the surface of the city's success stories. A life of shared apartments, of auditions that never answered back, of promises made only to himself. He played as if someone important might be listening. Not a producer, not a scout, but the version of himself that still believed this mattered. Most nights the audience came and went without faces, until one night someone stopped differently. She did not pause out of curiosity alone. She paused as if something had reached inside her routine and pulled. Her presence disrupted the corner before he ever noticed her visually. The air shifted first, a subtle tension, a quiet contrast. She did not belong to the margins of the street. Her coat was tailored, her posture trained by rooms where attention was currency. The glow of her phone faded in her hand. As the melody claimed space, it did not ask permission to occupy. She had been on her way somewhere else. She always was. Her life unfolded in clean lines. Scheduled days, curated evenings, expectations that arrived before emotions did. The city usually served her as background, beautiful, efficient, distant. But this corner refused to stay in the background. The sound felt unfinished in a way that demanded patience. She listened without performing the act of listening. He noticed her only after finishing a song, when the silence felt heavier than usual. His eyes lifted out of habit, scanning reactions, preparing for indifference. Instead, they met hers. The moment stretched without words. Two worlds recognized each other without understanding how. There was no dramatic exchange, no cinematic spark obvious enough to name. What passed between them was quieter, more dangerous, a shared awareness that something genuine had slipped past their defenses. She stayed for another song, then another. The city continued moving around them, indifferent and loud, but the space between the guitar and her stillness became strangely protected. When she finally walked away, it felt unfinished in the way important things often do. That night, he played longer than usual. Not louder, not better, just more present. He did not know her name, she did not know his story, but something had been placed gently into the future. She returned 2 nights later. This time, he noticed her before the music noticed him. He felt it in his hands, a hesitation, a shift in tempo. He adjusted without thinking, letting the song bend into something softer, something that waited instead of chased. She stood closer now, no longer pretending she might leave at any second. The distance between her world and his narrowed, not through effort, but through curiosity. She watched his fingers press into strings that had long ago stopped shining. She watched his face carry a seriousness that had nothing to do with performance. Around them, the street smelled of oil, night air, and ambition. The sound of a distant siren bled briefly into the melody, then faded. California had always been good at reminding people how close dreams and danger lived to each other. When the song ended, he nodded in acknowledgement. A small gesture, almost shy, she responded with a smile that surprised even her. It became a pattern without discussion. She appeared when the city dimmed. He played as if expecting her. Their connection grew not through grand gestures, but through repetition, through shared glances, through the way she learned which moments of his music carried sadness instead of hunger, through the way he learned that her elegance was not armor, but inheritance. Eventually, presence turned into familiarity. They began walking short distances together after his sets. Never far, never obvious. Their conversations existed in gestures, expressions, and pauses. Words exchanged sparingly, carefully, as if speaking too much might scare the fragile truth forming between them. She learned he lived with uncertainty, the way others lived with routine. He learned she lived with privilege the way others lived with obligation. The contrast did not repel them. It fascinated them. But power rarely stays unaware for long. In a house perched above the city, where glass reflected the lights below like a conquered constellation, her absence began to register. Her delays were noticed. Her attention drifted at dinners designed to impress donors, partners, and futures already decided. Her father noticed everything. He was not a man who raised his voice. He did not need to. Control, for him, was an environment. People adjusted themselves around it instinctively. His success had been built on patience, on reading the leverage in every situation, on understanding that the most effective force was the one never publicly applied. When he learned about the musician, it was not through confrontation. It arrived as information, a name, a location, a pattern. He did not forbid, he observed. And in the quiet spaces where power lives, observation is never passive. The young man felt the shift before he understood it. Emails went unanswered. A producer who had once shown mild interest suddenly grew distant. An open mic opportunity quietly disappeared from a calendar. Nothing dramatic, nothing traceable, just enough friction to slow momentum. He blamed himself at first. That was easier. But the timing was too precise, the obstacles too clean. Doubt began to creep into his playing, not in sound, but in posture. The guitar felt heavier, the nights felt shorter. The dream, once fragile but forward-moving, seemed to stall in place. She noticed their meetings grew more careful, more hidden. The streets they chose were darker, quieter, less forgiving. Yet the intimacy deepened, shaped by the awareness that time was no longer generous. She showed him pieces of her world in fragments, not the luxury, but the loneliness behind it. He showed her pieces of his ambition, not the fantasy, but the cost. They loved without illusions, and that made the threat real. Far above the streetlights, decisions were being made without raised voices. The father understood one thing clearly: love could not be commanded, but futures could be negotiated. He did not attack the relationship directly. He understood that resistance fed romance. Instead, he targeted what the young man valued most, the belief that his music might one day matter. Opportunity was placed carefully on a table, not offered, not denied, simply made visible. A path forward existed, but it curved away from her. No ultimatums were spoken, none were needed. The message arrived the way power prefers, through implication, through consequence, through silence heavy enough to interpret itself. When she realized what was happening, the weight of it settled in her chest like a bruise. She had grown up understanding sacrifice, but never choosing it. For the first time, love asked something of her that privilege could not solve. The night of the performance arrived like a held breath, a small venue, a real audience, the kind of chance that did not come often and never came twice. The guitar rested against him, as if sensing the tension. The air backstage was thick with expectation and loss. She was there, hidden in the crowd, heart pounding in a way no gala had ever inspired. She knew what this moment meant. She knew what he had been offered and what it cost. He stepped onto the stage carrying more than music. Every choice he had avoided now waited in a single moment. The lights rose, and the city listened. The stage lights were warmer than the street lights he knew, softer but more exposing. They revealed everything. The wear on his jacket, the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers hesitated a fraction longer than usual before touching the strings. The room was not large, but it carried weight. Industry eyes hid behind casual expressions. Phones stayed down, but attention was sharp. This was not a crowd looking to be impressed. It was a crowd looking to decide. He felt the familiar urge to disappear. Not to run, but to dissolve into sound, to let the music speak where words had always failed him. The guitar rested against his chest, steady, loyal, unchanged by the stakes suddenly imposed on it. It had no ambition. It had no fear. It only knew how to respond when asked. Somewhere in the audience, she sat still. Her presence was not obvious. She did not dress to be seen tonight. She did not want to be recognized, questioned, reported back to rooms where her absence would be measured. Yet she felt impossibly visible to herself. Every breath reminded her that this night would not end the same way it had begun. She had offered him an exit, not from love, but from conflict. She had framed it gently, carefully, as if wrapping pain in mercy. She would step away. She would return to the path drawn for her. She would become what was expected, so that he could become what he dreamed. She had said it without drama, without tears, because she believed that was what strength looked like. He had listened without interrupting and said nothing. Now, as he adjusted the strap of the guitar and looked out at the faces waiting to evaluate him, the silence of his earlier response echoed louder than any argument could have. The room quieted, not because someone demanded it, but because anticipation had learned to be patient. He began to play. The first notes were restrained, almost cautious. A melody shaped by habit, by nights on corners where attention came and went. It was good, clean, understandable. The kind of opening that promised competence. But competence was not what had carried him this far. As the song unfolded, something shifted. The rhythm slowed, the chords deepened. He allowed imperfections to surface, small hesitations, stretched pauses, moments where silence was permitted to breathe. The melody stopped trying to please. It started trying to tell the truth. The audience leaned in without realizing it. This was not a song designed to sell. It was a song designed to survive. He played as if the room no longer existed, as if the city outside had folded into memory. The sound carried images instead of hooks. Street corners damp with late-night mist, hands numb from cold, hope folded and unfolded like a letter never sent. And threaded through it all, unmistakable and unhidden, was love. Not romanticized, not safe. Love as risk, love as refusal. She felt it immediately. Her chest tightened as recognition bloomed into inevitability. This was not the performance that had been promised to people with influence. This was not the version of him that could be shaped, redirected, softened into acceptability. This was him choosing. The final notes hung in the air longer than expected. No one rushed to clap. The silence was not confusion, it was processing. Applause followed, scattered at first, then fuller but cautious, respectful, measured, not unanimous. He stepped off stage knowing something irreversible had just occurred. Consequences did not arrive dramatically. They rarely do. The days that followed were quiet in ways that felt deliberate. Messages remained unanswered. Feedback was vague. Opportunities floated just out of reach, visible but unattainable. No one criticized him openly. No one praised him loudly either. He had not failed, but he had not complied. And in certain circles, that distinction mattered more than talent. She watched it unfold with a mix of pride and dread. Each closed door felt like a personal weight. She knew where the resistance originated. She understood the efficiency with which her father could make the world feel smaller without appearing cruel. She tried to intervene, subtly, carefully, but power did not respond to requests framed as emotions. It responded to leverage, and she had none left to spend. The distance between them changed, not emotionally, logistically. They still found moments together, but the city felt less forgiving now. Streets that once offered privacy now seemed exposed. Every glance felt observed, every choice documented by invisible ledgers. The strain did not break them immediately. It refined them. He became quieter, more introspective. His music grew heavier, not sadder, but denser. Songs no longer asked questions. They stated truths. She became braver in small ways, choosing absence where presence was demanded, refusing to smile when silence was expected. These acts did not dismantle her father's influence, but they redefined her relationship to it. Eventually, the unspoken confrontation arrived, not as an argument, as an invitation. Her father requested her presence one afternoon, framed as routine, disguised as concern. The house above the city felt colder than usual, its walls echoing with achievements and expectations layered over generations. He did not mention the musician immediately. He spoke instead about legacy, about timing, about how certain paths required sacrifices that were not negotiable, but necessary. His voice remained calm, reasonable, almost gentle. Then he stopped and waited. She understood that this was the moment where denial would insult him. She acknowledged the relationship without apology. The air shifted. He did not threaten. He did not forbid. He explained. He explained how influence worked, how industries protected themselves, how idealism burned brightly but briefly when unsupported. He explained that the young man's future did not need to be destroyed, only redirected. There was a way forward, one where everyone could be spared embarrassment, one where the music could live, but love, as it currently existed, could not. The message was clear, delivered without cruelty. When she left the room, she felt older than she had ever felt before. She returned to him that night, not to argue, not to plead, to be honest. They sat together without touching for a long time. The city moved around them, unaware of the fracture forming quietly between two people who refused to look away from it. She told him everything. He listened without interruption, the way he always did when something mattered. When she finished, the silence between them was not empty. It was full of understanding, of fear, of relief. She expected him to be angry. He wasn't. He expected her to leave. She didn't. What passed between them then was not a decision. It was recognition that no version of this story would be painless, that whatever they chose would cost something real. That night, they did not promise anything. Promises felt dishonest in the face of power. Instead, they stayed. And staying became its own act of defiance. The breaking point did not come from confrontation. It came from exhaustion. Months passed. The pressure accumulated quietly. He worked more hours unrelated to music. She navigated obligations that tightened like a net. Their moments together became fewer, heavier, burdened by the knowledge that they were borrowed time. When the final offer arrived, it was unmistakable. A contract, a tour opportunity, a chance that artists spent lifetimes chasing. No explicit condition was written. None needed to be. The absence of her name said everything. She saw it before he did. She held the weight of that realization alone for hours, walking through parts of the city where no one recognized her, letting the noise blur into anonymity. By the time she returned to him, her decision had already been made. She would leave. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she loved him enough to refuse to be the reason his dream died. She framed it gently, as mercy, as closure, as inevitability. This time he responded, not with words, with action. The night he was meant to sign, he went back to the corner where everything had begun. Same streetlights, same uneven pavement, same quiet indifference of the city. He played, not for money, not for attention, for truth. The crowd that gathered was unremarkable, ordinary people passing through, but the music carried something unmistakable, a clarity that did not ask permission. Someone recorded it, someone shared it, and the story escaped the walls built to contain it. The corner welcomed him like an old truth. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. The streetlights still flickered with tired persistence. The smell of asphalt and distant food trucks still mixed in the air. The city still moved past without asking his name, but he arrived differently, not searching, not hoping, simply present. The guitar felt lighter. Not because the future was clearer, but because the lie had finally been set down. He played longer than usual. He did not watch the coins. He did not track faces. He allowed the music to unravel at its own pace, unconcerned with structure or appeal. The songs were not designed to rise. They lingered. They carried the weight of something chosen and something lost. People stopped, not many at first, then more. There was a stillness in the way they listened, the kind that comes when sound stops being entertainment and becomes recognition. A woman leaned against a parking meter, arms folded, eyes distant. A man paused mid-call and never resumed it. Someone sat on the curb without realizing they had done so. And somewhere in that unremarkable gathering, a phone remained raised just long enough. The video traveled quietly at first, a few shares, a caption that didn't try too hard, a fragment of melody floating through timelines crowded with noise. It did not go viral in the explosive way people imagined when they spoke of sudden success. It spread the way honesty spreads, through people who felt something and needed to pass it on. By morning, messages began arriving, not from the places that had once ignored him, but from corners he had never aimed for. Independent labels, small venues, writers who described music the way he played it, as survival rather than product. None of it came with guarantees, but none of it asked him to disappear. She watched the video alone. She did not need to read the comments. She did not need validation. The first few seconds were enough to make her hands tremble. The street behind him looked familiar, the posture unmistakable. But what struck her most was the absence of hesitation. He was no longer asking, he was stating. Tears came quietly, not from sadness, but from something closer to grief, the mourning of a version of the future she had believed she could protect. She understood now that leaving had never truly been an option. Not for him, not for her. Her father heard about the video before she mentioned it. Power always does. He did not react outwardly. He reviewed it the way he reviewed investments, calmly, analytically. He recognized the danger immediately, not because the musician had become untouchable, but because the narrative had slipped beyond his reach. Control functions best in silence, and silence had been broken. Still, he waited, because patience had always been his most effective instrument. The opportunities that followed were uneven, imperfect, and demanding. He traveled without comfort, slept in borrowed spaces, played rooms where the sound systems failed, and the audiences listened anyway. His name appeared in small fonts, then slightly larger ones. He earned just enough to keep moving. Fame did not arrive, meaning did. Each city felt different, each crowd carried its own weight. But the music remained constant, grounded, unpolished, unwilling to soften its edges. He spoke less than ever off stage. On stage he said everything, She followed from a distance at first, not physically, emotionally. She kept track quietly, privately. She learned the rhythm of his movement the way she had once learned the rhythms of social calendars. The difference was that this knowledge did not suffocate her, it steadied her. Eventually, distance became unbearable. They met again without ceremony, without expectation. No grand reunion, no dramatic reconciliation. Just two people sitting across from each other, older in ways that had nothing to do with time. The city around them had not changed. They had. What passed between them was not apology or promise. It was acceptance of what had been done, of what had been lost, of what remained. They chose each other again, not recklessly, not defiantly, but honestly. And honesty carried consequences. Her father's response came months later, not through punishment, through absence. Invitations stopped. Introductions ceased. Doors once opened without question now required explanation. She was not cast out. That would have been visible, dramatic, inefficient. She was simply no longer prioritized. It hurt more than exile would have, because it forced her to understand how conditional her belonging had always been. She rebuilt quietly, not dramatically, not publicly. She took work that required effort instead of appearance. She learned independence the way people learn a second language, awkwardly, imperfectly, with moments of exhaustion and pride. The love they shared matured under pressure. It no longer needed secrecy to feel intense. It no longer needed rebellion to feel real. It existed in shared routines, in small apartments, in long drives between shows, in nights where success felt distant, but purpose felt close. They did not conquer the industry. They did not dismantle power. They outlasted it. Years passed. The guitar aged further. His hands grew steadier. His music reached people who needed it, not millions, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to live. She stood beside him not as a sacrifice, not as a symbol, but as herself. Her father aged too. Power softened at the edges when time began asking its own questions. One evening, long after anger had lost its usefulness, he attended a performance anonymously. He stood at the back. He listened. He recognized the talent he had tried to redirect. He recognized the cost. And for the first time, he recognized that control had not failed. It had simply met something it could not own. He left before the final song ended. No reconciliation followed. None was needed. The final image was simple: a street corner, a guitar, a man playing not to be seen but to be true, and a woman standing nearby, no longer watching from the shadows. The city moved around them, as it always had. But this time, it did not feel like opposition. It felt like context. The violin never stopped being what it had always been: wood, strings, wear. What changed was the weight it carried, not the burden of a dream deferred, but the proof that some loves do not ask permission. They simply endure.